Everyone, welcome to the history class. In this video, I am going to start theme 7 of class 11th history, that is changing cultural traditions. Students, in this theme, our focus will be on the 14th to 17th century Europe, where different changes were occurring in the society, in the culture of Europe, and we'll be covering different fields like art, architecture, paintings, literature, etc. So let's start the topic. From the 14th to the end of the 17th century, towns were growing in many countries of Europe. A distinct urban culture also developed. Towns, particularly Florence, Venice, and Rome, became centers of art and learning. The invention of printing at the same time made books and prints available to many people. A sense of history also developed in Europe, and people contrasted their modern world with the ancient one of the Greeks and Romans. Religion came to be seen as something which each individual should choose for himself. From the 19th century, historians use the term Renaissance, which literally means rebirth, to describe the cultural changes of this period. So, Europe was experiencing new cultural changes, not only in one field but in many fields, including art, architecture, literature, type of kingship, etc. There are different sources, a vast amount of material on European history from the 14th century, like documents, printed books, paintings, sculptures, buildings, textiles, etc. Much of this has been carefully preserved in the art galleries and museums of Europe and America. Now, firstly, we'll discuss revival of the Italian cities. There were many cities which were very prominent during the Roman Empire, but they started with the fall of the Roman Empire. These cities also fell into ruins. There was no unified government, and the Pope was not so strong at that time. So, the Western Roman Empire, after its fall, Western European countries, they were having a new feature that appeared was the feudal system, which was dominant in the Western Europe. This you have already studied in the previous chapter, right? And on the eastern side, the Byzantine Empire or the Eastern Roman Empire, with the expansion of Islam, there was a mixed culture developing there in the eastern side of Europe. This also led to the trade links, expansion of trade in the Mediterranean Sea, and the Mongols opened up trade with China by the Silk Route. So many new cities, port cities especially, emerged during this time in Italy, and these cities became independent city states. The most prominent ones were Florence and Venice, which were republic, and many other port cities ruled by the princes. One of the most vibrant city was Venice, another was Genoa. They were different from other parts of Europe. The clergy was not politically dominant here, nor the powerful feudal lords. Only the rich merchants and the bankers actively participating in governing the city, and this helped the idea of citizenship. Now, universities and humanism. The earliest universities in Europe had been set up in Italian towns. The University of Padua and Bologna had been centers of legal studies from the 11th century, commerce being the chief activity in the city. There was an increasing demand for lawyers and notaries to write and interpret rules and written agreements, without which trade on a large scale was not possible. So, law was therefore the most popular subject to study. Francisco Patriarch, a very important name, represented this change. To Patriarch, antiquity was a distinctive civilization which could be best understood through the actual word of the ancient Greeks and Romans. He therefore stressed the importance of a close reading of ancient authors. He gave importance to the ancient writings. This educational program implied that there was much to be learned which religious teachings alone could not give. This was the culture which historians in the 19th century were to labeled humanism. Means now the focus was shifting from religion to other fields also. This was a great change. By the early 15th century, the term humanist was used for the masters who taught grammar, rhetoric, poetry, history, moral philosophies, etc. These subjects were not drawn from or connected with religion and emphasized skills developed by individuals, thoughts, discussions, and debates. By 15th century, Florence became one of the important cities of Italy. It was known by Dante Alighieri, a layman who wrote on religious themes, and Giotto's, an artist who painted lifelike portraits very different from the stiff figures done by the earlier artists. This was a great change coming in the paintings. Now the artists of this period, they were drawing more realistic themes. From then it developed as the most exciting intellectual city in Italy and as a center of artistic creativity. The term Renaissance man is often used to describe a person with many interests and skills because many of the individuals who became well known at this time were people of many parts. They were scholars, diplomats, theologians, artists combined in one. Means they have a varied interest. They were pursuing different fields at one time. Now, the humanist view of history. Human thought that they were restoring true civilization after centuries of darkness, for they believed that a dark age has set in after the collapse of the Roman Empire. In the Middle Ages, they argued the church had had such complete control over men's mind that all the learning of the Greeks and Romans had been blotted out. The humanists used the word modern for the period from the 15th century. Means the church which was dominant at that time, which usually influenced the thinking of the people. Now there was a shift in this thinking. Now the people were thinking individually, and human emotions, feelings, they got values. Science and philosophy, the Arabs' contribution. It was not solely the European people who contributed to these changes. There were the changes or the new inventions or the new works taken from the rest part of the world also. A great contribution was given by the Arab people. In the 14th century, many scholars began to read, translate work of Greek writers like Plato and Aristotle. Arabic translators had carefully preserved and translated ancient manuscripts. Plato was known as Aflatun and Aristotle as Arastu in Arabic language. Ptolemy's Almagest, a work on astronomy written in Greek before 140 CE, and it later translated into Arabic, carries the Arabic definite article al, which brings about Arabic connection. Ibn Sina, an Arab physician and philosopher of Bukhara in Central Asia, and Al-Razi, author of Medical Encyclopedia. These are very prominent names, especially the Ibn Sina. You have already studied about this personality in the chapter Central Islamic Lens. Ibn Rushd, an Arab philosopher of Spain, tried to resolve the tension between the philosophical knowledge and religious beliefs. His method was adopted by Christian thinkers. So these were the contribution given by the Arab people which were copied or which were adopted by the Western world. So students, with this I am winding up this topic here. I'll be making more videos on this chapter. Thank you for watching this video.